So you've mentioned this sort of addiction to chaos, and I see this being mentioned very much from, veterans and army people in terms of sort of adjusting yourself to this sort of a life dynamic and then, experiencing difficulties to get back to normal. So what what was this from your perspective? I'm just, curious to hear it from, from your personal point of view. What was that like, and how did you, realize that's the case? And then when you went back to normal life, like, what did it take for you to get back to normal and sort of put that aside?
Well, it's really interesting because of the fact that like we've learned a lot more.
Yeah.
So like a great for instance is some of the best trauma surgery and advancements in medical technology came out of these wars.
Wow.
Yeah, like combat treat like they have made such medical progressions because like you learn how to do battlefield crazy stuff. Like my friend was should have lost his arm, but they were able to reattach the thing and
Wow.
do like kind of experimental stuff. So when you think about stuff like that, the same is true as far as regard to like what we're learning about like what veterans are dealing with. I didn't know honestly, I had a chaos addiction until like probably within the last year, and that's because I
Hmm.
read an advanced copy of Tyler's book. It's
Hmm.
called Forging Chaos: A Warrior's Origin Story. It's by Tyler Gray.
Amazing.
And so we had me and my business partner, we acquired the book, sold it to Post Hill Press, and working on press release kits and everything else. That's what I'm
Nice.
going to be doing later today.
Nice.
But when it first started off, that's why I jumped into Heart Support, which
Hmm.
for those that are listening, Heart Support is we've won a couple of award-winning nonprofit that works specifically in the metal music industry
Hmm.
and helps fans of bands, everyone from Trivium to August Burn Dread to Bullet for My Valentine. They're all on tour together right now,
Everyone.
so
Yeah.
that's why I'm
Yeah.
pulling the to We Came as Romans and that whole crowd to help their fans overcome the struggles that they face in their day-to-day life. And so Jake was getting like a lot of veterans and who were coming back from these wars and would just talk to him after shows. And so he really wanted me to help out. And I was really, really resistant to working with veterans. I was like, we'll just do mental health and it'll be a broad spectrum catch-all, and the veterans will fall in
Hmm.
the bucket and everybody will fall in the bucket and it'll be fine. And what I was doing is I was running from my own hurt.
Hmm.
And I didn't want to talk about it at all. So I came home and I didn't
Hmm.
for like 10 years. It was like 2016, I think,
Wow.
when I wrote an article, because as I was studying, when I first got home, I was like, oh, I'm experiencing post-traumatic stress
Hmm.
disorder. This is what I'm experiencing
Hmm.
because that's what everybody knew, that's what everybody understood. And so when I began studying and doing my coursework for mental health, I was like, this doesn't make sense. Like
Hmm.
what I'm experiencing is not this, because post-traumatic stress disorder is it's a stimuli response to a traumatic event. So a great example is, the classic one is girl walks down a dark alley, gets raped in a dark alley, doesn't want to go down a dark alley. Veteran goes to war, doesn't want to deal with fireworks. That
Hmm.
makes sense. Sounds like, experiences like, causes flashbacks, it can be a song or whatever. I was not dealing with that. What I was doing is I was dwelling on like a lot of shame, a lot of guilt. I was like,
Hmm.
why did I do that? Why did I treat people that way? Why did I, when Kyle died, like that was my best friend, or
Hmm.
when my other friends died, or
Hmm.
when I had to shoot or move and like and do horrible things, like what? And then I start to question my identity, and I'm like, is this who I am? Am I a bad person?
Hmm.
Kind of thing. And I'm like, this is not post traumatic stress disorder. And so I started, I was like, why am I this way?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
we just asked the Google machine,
Yeah.
and it's funny. we tell most of our secrets to Google,
It's
which
true.
is kind of funny.
Yeah.
We're looking stuff up. My shoulder's busted.
Yeah.
XYZ. So, what do I hurt? And so I came across this article, I think it was like in the Washington Post or something, and it went on to become this book called What Have We Done? And like Bright Divinity and a couple other schools of thought were coming up with this. They called it the soul injury school.
Hmm.
And this clinical psychologist, Dr. Jonathan Shea, coined this term, moral injury. And he realized like that was what a lot of the soldiers who were returning home had to
Hmm.
do. And it was when you had to do things that violated your sense of right and wrong. So like
Wow.
basically everything that you do in war, like killing another human being, watching your friends die, if you have to shoot a woman or child because they're carrying an explosive or something like that, that you see the whole Chris Kyle
Yeah.
stuff on American Sniper and so forth. So out of that, I was like, oh my gosh, this is what I feel. And that led to like a lot of new therapies being developed. And where ones kind of took more of the forefront. So like cognitive behavioral therapy and dialectical behavioral therapy to help vets kind of process through that. And then out of that became EMDR, the rapid eye movement
Yeah.
desensitization, then the ketamine infusion. And I've done all of this, like
Wow.
mind you, yeah. Because it was like something's wrong with me and I cannot figure this out. And really, as I explored kind of more of that like mental health aspect, I realized that the industry was really broken because people either wanted to treat it with a pill
Yeah.
or they wanted to treat it with just counseling or spirituality. And I was like, it has to be a full whole body
Yeah.
approach. And
Yeah.
like I had left out the physical component. A lot of us were exposed to heavy metals and toxins and
Hmm.
that aspect that can mess with your brain. And then we learned about traumatic brain injury from the amount of explosions and everything else that we
Wow.
were going on. Tyler and his team now are putting together an entire comprehensive program for veterans to eventually go through called New Bio, where it addresses all of that. Because, human beings are emotional, we're intellectual, we're spiritual beings. And if you just treat one aspect, like if I had a broken leg and I was like, or here's a great
Yeah.
example. If I came to you and I was like, I'm depressed, and you were like, okay, cool, we're going to put you on some SSRIs, you're going to be better in no time, but I'm depressed because I cheated on my girlfriend or something.
Mm.
Why do you need SSRIs for
Yeah.
that? You
Yeah.
need like some counseling and
Yeah.
other stuff. And so what we're doing is we're cherry picking and throwing everything. And so as kind of more of the information and data has come out, what we're seeing now is a lot of the Iraq and Afghanistan vets that were in the combat scenarios and environments are dealing with moral injury or, what we're discovering now is they come from that chaotic environment, they thrive, and then they come home and they cannot be comfortable in that own space. And so they create chaos in their own lives because
Oh.
it makes them come alive. So whether that can be drinking or drugs or just violence or whatever it is,
Yeah.
they have to have some form of controlled chaos for them, and that it'll eventually implode their relationships or friendships and whatnot. So we're seeing that as well, and those are linked. And then there's traumatic brain injuries, there's post traumatic stress. So just really knowing how it all functions together has really helped us understand a little bit more of like what's happened. But you also have to remember that most large scale major combat operations were done in 2015. And granted, the wars continued on until 2021. And you had people that saw combat during those time periods, but overall, it had
Mm.
scaled down. And so you had an entire entered the military and now they're getting out and they're saying, oh, I have post traumatic stress. And the VA is like, we have these rapid numbers of post traumatic stress. And I go, well, that's interesting because we haven't had anybody, these guys have not seen combat. And I know a ton of dudes that were getting rated that had never deployed, stayed home, worked on computers their entire 4 years in the
Mm.
military. And then they're like, I have PTSD. And I'm like, how do you have PTSD?
Yeah.
That's that's not possible.
Mhm.
But they're getting rated for it, and they're continuing to struggle. And eventually, when I was doing my clinical work with Dr. Kent Corso, who's
Mm.
a leading suicidologist, he pointed me to because it's for suicide overall, but I wanted to
Mm.
know military stuff, and he's an Air Force veteran,
Mm.
and I was like, dude, what is going on? I was like, this doesn't make sense. And he pointed me to a 2012 study by Gibbons and colleagues that basically shows that when you exit the military, if you don't find a new unit, tribe, religious
Yeah.
affiliation, or some type of community network,
Hmm.
veterans will struggle the rest of their lives. And it's because they're so used to that microcosm of community. And
Hmm.
if you look at the way that Gen Z has these rapid moments of loneliness and how
Hmm.
it's become this epidemic, like what the Cigna report
Hmm.
signaled, what we're seeing is they were in a close knit community where everybody has their back. They get out, suddenly they're lonely and they're
Hmm.
spiraling, and they're like, something's wrong with me. I've got PTSD. They're like, I'm depressed. Everything's triggering to me. And it's because like they don't know how to work in a corporate life because they've been doing the military the whole time. They're used to having somebody tell them exactly what to do, what time to wake up, when to eat, when to
Yeah.
shower, go to the bathroom, the whole nine yards. And they come out. And so what they're really dealing with is a transition disorder, because they're transitioning back to
Hmm.
civilian life. And so as we've kind of uncovered all these aspects of the mental health journey, we've just learned a lot more and how to treat people appropriately.